everyone, and welcome to the first day of Bookmas. So this month we've decided we're going to do a video every single day in December, and this is the first of them. This is actually our second attempt at filming this video because we filmed it a couple of days ago and I hated it. And it was like 80 minutes long and nothing needs to be that long. So I'm hoping that today we're going to have not only a better video but also a more concise video. So let's just get on with it. These are all of the series that I have finished in their entirety. By that I mean that if it is a series which is continuing, then there have been no more installments announced. So I'll get to a couple of those where I think there might be ones coming in the future. If I don't say anything about the series, it means I can't remember anything about it because I've read a lot over these past few years. Most of these I've read from like 2013 onwards, but there are a few that I can't remember anything about. So I'm not going to try and pretend that I can. So if I just say the book series name and then the books and then move on, don't question it. It's fine. So there are 57 series for me to talk about today, and I'm just going to do it. I hope you enjoy this video. So the first series that I can remember finishing in my life ever was a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. There are 13 books in the series. I'm not going to give you the titles for all of them. This is a middle grade series about a set of orphans, or a set of children who are orphaned in a fire. They get sent off to live with this guy who ends up being an absolute psychopath and just wants their inheritance money, and they kind of get followed around by him as they move from guardian to guardian to try and find them somewhere to live, which is fun. Has been adapted into a movie and a TV show on Netflix, so you've probably seen it if you haven't read it. The next series I can remember finishing is the Warrior Cat series by Erin Hunter. So there are 6 books in the initial Warrior Cat series. I've read all 6 of them. There's another set of 6 which follows it. I've read all 6 of those. But there are like seven I think, complete sets of 6 out now, and I've only read the first 2 sets in their entirety. So that's another 2 series. Also a manga. There's also some like companion, like non-fiction world building books, which is really fun. Like, this is a whole universe. I definitely recommend these books for younger readers, especially if it's a child who you'd like to kind of introduce the concepts of like death and war to, because where you're reading it through these cats, it's an easier way to approach subjects like death. Like, a lot of characters die in these. If you find it hard like dealing with death, don't read these, because I can remember crying my eyes out at least 3 times during just this first one when I was really little, and it just gets sadder as you go on. But I think these are a great place to kind of start for talking about subjects like that with younger readers. Another series that I'd really recommend for younger readers starting to learn how to talk about tougher subjects is the Who Let the Gods Out series by Maz Evans, which is Who Let the Gods Out, Beyond the Odyssey, Simply the Quest, and Against All Gods. I read these with Sean last summer and ended up being pleasantly surprised by them. They're kind of the pinnacle of what makes middle grade great, because although there's a lot of fun going on, so there's a boy called Elliot, someone accidentally releases a big bad who's been imprisoned underneath Stonehenge, and Elliot gets swept up in it, and he ends up working with these gods to kind of save the day. So obviously there's a lot of hilarity, there's a lot of funny moments that go on, you'll find yourself laughing more often than not. But also, Elliot's mother is suffering with, I think it's dementia, but I don't believe that it's actually explicitly stated on the page. It might be something that I can't remember happening. But that's obviously very tough for him because he is caring for her and he can't let people know that she is ill because he doesn't want her to get in trouble. His dad was sent to prison when he was younger, so he's never known his father. He's recently lost his grandparents. So although these are a very fun and upbeat series, you do have a lot of tougher subjects discussed in them as well. And I think that is what makes Maz Evans such a brilliant writer. She's also recently announced the first book in her next series, which is coming out in February, which is called Vice Spy. And I'm definitely going to be picking that up because that's about a girl whose parents are divorcing and they're like spies. So it sounds like, again, she's going to mix that really fun story with the tougher subjects, and she does it impeccably. The next series that I'd like to talk about is The London Eye Mystery by Siobhan Dowd, which was followed up by The Guggenheim Mystery by Robin Stevens. So sadly, Siobhan Dowd passed away before she could write the second book in this series, but in tribute to her, Robin Stevens took her ideas and she crafted it into this story. So the first one is a mystery based around the London Eye, the second one is a mystery based around the Guggenheim Museum. These, again, like really solid middle grade mysteries. I've nearly finished Robin Stevens' Murder Most Unladylike series, so if I do another series I've finished list next year, that will be on there. But if you haven't tried her writing, I'd really recommend it, because even for somebody who reads a lot of adult mysteries, her mysteries are a lot less predictable than some of the adult ones that I've read. Now we're starting to get into the ones that I can't really remember much about, so I'll just list these ones. These are ones that I read kind of pre the blog. So that includes Fallen Angel by Heather Terrell, which is Fallen Angel and Eternity. The Need series by Carrie Jones, which is Need, Captivate, Entice and Endure. The Beautiful Dead by Eden Maguire, which is Jonas, Arizona, Summer and Phoenix. And that is actually a series that I really wish I hadn't finished, because it's very repetitive. Once you've read one, you've read them all. So if you only ever started the first one on those, just let them go. But alternately, I would really recommend Need still. I wish I would reread it, but I just don't think that I'd love it as much second time around, because it's like fairies and I'm not really into those anymore. But if you're looking for like fairy stories and you have kind of exhausted all of the popular young adult options at the moment, give those a go. There's The Dead Girls Detective Agency by Susie Cox, which is The Dead Girls Detective Agency and Dead Girls Walking. Quite similar to The Beautiful Dead in that they're both about teenagers who are dead and they're trying to like solve the mysteries of their deaths so that they can move on to the other side. I was hoping The Dead Girls Detective Agency was going to get a sequel, but that, like another sequel, like a third book, but that doesn't seem to be happening. You've got Sleigh by Kim Curran, which is currently Sleigh and Sleigh on Tour, which is another series that I was hoping was going to get continued, but there has been no information about book 3. But for this one, I'd say if you like supernatural but you wish that instead of the Winchester brothers you had One Direction, this is going to be the book for you. It's a boy band that slays demons. They travel around the world, they're really, really famous, and they slay demons, and it's a lot of fun. Very, very campy, but really recommend it. The next series I'd like to talk about is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This is another series that I think might end up being expanded on in the future. So currently this is One of Us is Lying and One of Us is Next. The first book is about 5 teenagers who go into detention. One of them dies and they have to work out who is lying out with the brain, the beauty, the bad boy or the jock. The second book follows one of these characters' sibling as they are kind of involved in their own mystery in their school year, and some of the characters from the first book reappear, which is really nice. I love the way that these stories are linked. We've also got the Thearon Fox series by Jane Harper, which currently is The Dry and Force of Nature. I'm hoping that these ones will get expanded on as well, because I love Aaron's character. But if you like adult mysteries that have really distinctive senses of location, these I would really recommend. These are set in Australia, and in the first one in particular, which is about a man who kills his family and himself, and they blame it on the fact that there's a drought, so his family farm is failing. So the setting and the season and the weather becomes such an integral part of the story, and if you like books like that, this is one I would highly recommend. There's also Silverwood by Betsy Streeter, which is currently Silverwood and Silver Shard. I finally caught up with this series over the summer. I was grateful to get hold of copies through NetGalley. I was hoping there were going to end up being more, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be, because I think the second book came out 4 years ago. But this follows a family called the Silverwoods who are hunting these creatures called the Tromindocs. They're actually quite scary, and it's a very unique monster. So if you'd like something that is familiar because you've got like the family hunting element but has something that's completely different, this is a series I would recommend for you. The next series I'd like to talk about is the Empty Coffin series by Greg Alton, which is Envy and Betrayal. This is another series that I thought was going to end up having more books in it, but there's only the 2, and there haven't been the 2 since I think about 2012, so I'm guessing this one's over. Next I'd like to talk about a couple of series that I wish had stayed as sequels, which includes the Virginia Shreve series by Cameron Mackler. That's The Earth, My Butt and Other Big Round Things, and The Universe is Expanding and So Am I. I don't know why this had a sequel. It was okay as a standalone, but I think the fact that it became a sequel annoyed me more. You've also got If I Stay by Gail Foreman, which is If I Stay and Where She Went. This was a 5-star read for me the first time I read it, and I thought it was very powerful. It's all about a girl who is in a car accident and she has to decide whether to go with her parents who have died in the car accident, or whether to come back and give life another chance. But the second book kind of destroys everything that I loved about the first one, and it makes the male, like the love interest, into such a dickwad. So that was great. There's also Gifted by Donald Hoonan, which is Gifted and Pariah. This is a series which I can't remember much about, but I can remember thinking that it didn't need a sequel, and I'm glad that there wasn't a third one, because I thought there was going to be a third one coming for a little while. But there is a book series that I'd like to talk about which needed a sequel quite badly, and that was Dear Martin by Nick Stone, which is Dear Martin and Dear Justice. Dear Justice came out earlier in the summer, and it is the perfect continuation of this story. So Dear Martin focuses on a boy called Martin who is racially profiled by police. Obviously a terrible thing for him to go through, and a lot worse happens later in the novel, so this is quite a hard read, so definitely look into some kind of trigger warnings if you are sensitive to things like death and things like racial profiling. But I think it's a very necessary read, and if anything, Dear Justice is even more so, because Martin is a kid who has a scholarship, he comes from a well-off family, his family is still together. But Dear Justice follows one of the minor characters in Dear Martin as they are writing letters to justice, and they come from the wrong side of the tracks. They've been involved in a gang, their father left, they've got like a broken family, and the way that the justice system treats them is even worse than the way that it treats justice in Dear Martin. So I feel as though it's the perfect exploration of not only the racial discrepancies in the justice system, so between black teenagers and white teenagers, but even the racial discrepancies in amongst, like, the class discrepancies between black teenagers and their interactions with the justice system. So I would highly recommend picking up this duology. I think it should be required reading. We've then got the C.J. Townsend series by Gillian Hoffman, which is Retribution, Last Witness and The Cutting Room. This was another series that I read before I started blogging, so I'd like to reread these ones eventually. This was the first adult crime novel I ever read, and I read it when I was like 13, so I probably shouldn't have been allowed to borrow it. I literally grabbed this one off the library shelf and was like, this is a good book, it's got a butterfly on it, that makes me happy. So this follows a lady called C.J. Townsend, as she is a state attorney. She is prosecuting the man who assaulted her when she was younger. And it's kind of like the moral dilemma of, should she be involved in the case? Should she let it go to somebody else? What if they can't get justice for her and she can get justice? It's a very, very interesting story. But it's one that I definitely want to reread because I can't remember much about it. I've then got 3 series by Holly Black that I'd like to talk about, which is the Folk of the Air series. I'm counting this because I've read the original trilogy. I haven't read How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories yet, but that's more of like a companion novel rather than actually in the series. This was a case of loved the first book, didn't really like the second one, and I thought the ending was really disappointing, which was a massive shame because so many people love this series. I've also read the Magisterium series and the Spiderwick Chronicles by Holly Black in full. The Magisterium, which she wrote with Cassandra Clare, and the Spiderwick Chronicles, which she wrote with Tony DiTilizzi. I would recommend the Spiderwick Chronicles. They're like the creepier side of middle grade. There's lots of very spooky illustrations, very Tim Burton-esque if you're into those kind of things, but I wouldn't recommend the Magisterium series because a lot of people said that it was basically a Harry Potter ripoff, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. It got to the stage where Sean and I had made a drinking game while we were reading the last one together because of the amount of times that stalagmite, stalactite and coruscating are said throughout these stories. Every time one of those words was said, we'd just yell shut at each other. So if you are somebody who drinks and you'd like to read a series that will get you absolutely hammered, play our Magisterium themed drinking game. But if you'd rather not do that, then just, I'd say, avoid those 5. I'd then like to talk about 2 series by Veronica Roth, which is the Divergent trilogy, which is Divergent, Insurgent and Allegiant, and the Carver Mark duology, which is Carver Mark and the Fates Divide. Divergent, by a book by itself, I love. I've given this 5 stars, I've read it twice, and I gave it 5 stars both times. I think it perfectly encapsulates that feeling of like not fitting in, of feeling like you would be better off somewhere else, even though it might let your family down and you kind of have to like strike out on your own and go your own way. I think the world is really fascinating. The idea of the different factions is great. But this is a series that, like, the second book feels very flat. It's not really that necessary, and the third book just goes completely off the rails, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. However, the Carver Mark duology, a lot of people didn't like this one because there's some instances of kind of glorifying self-harm. Like, the main character, every time she kills someone, she, like, does a scar on her arm, and in amongst her people, that's kind of like a really good thing because, like, the more people you've killed, the better of a warrior you are. and that's quite problematic. Obviously, if you are averse to reading books about self-harm, I would not recommend this one for you. But I thought that the world was really great, and I also really enjoyed the ending of this one. And I think because I didn't like Allegiant, I imagined I wasn't going to like the end of Carver Mark, so I went into it with very low expectations and ended up being pleasantly surprised. Seeing as I've segued nicely into a little section of talking about dystopians, I'm just gonna put a few more dystopian series all together here. So if you've been looking for dystopian recommendations, this might be the section for you. I've got the Flawed series by Cecilia Ahern, which is Flawed and Perfect. This was another series that I wasn't a huge fan of. The whole concept is that, like, if you're not a perfect person, you get an F branded into your skin, and the main character in this book is a black teenager who gets branded with this F because she isn't perfect. And it's kind of her story as she's trying to prove her innocence and trying to be seen as perfect again. And there's just something about the idea of a white author choosing to write a black teenager who had to be so flawed that they were marked. It made me very uncomfortable as a reader. That probably wasn't the way that Cecilia Ahern intended it to come across, but it was the way that I interpreted it, and it made me very uncomfortable. And I only really read the second book because I hoped that that was going to be addressed, and it wasn't, and I kind of wish I hadn't read these in the first place. If I'd known that that was an aspect of it, I wouldn't have been picking these up. A dystopian series which I'm glad that I've read though was the Eve series by Anna Carey, which is Eve, Once and Rise. I read these pre-blog, so I can't remember too much about them, but I loved the fact that this was about a world where kind of the girls are trapped and they're just meant to be like baby machines. I think it's kind of similar to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, but I haven't read that. But this girl called Eve, she manages to escape. She meets a boy on the outside and she has to learn how to trust him because all her life she's been told that boys are bad, boys just want you to make babies, boys are the ones that are kind of oppressing us. And she has to work with this boy. I think his name is Caleb, but it's been so long since I've read them, I'm probably making that up. She has to work with him to kind of take down this corrupt government, and I can remember really enjoying like the whole series, and it's definitely one that I'd like to reread at some point. I'd also like to talk about The Rain by Virginia Bergin, which is The Rain and the Storm. This is a dystopian in which the rain starts killing people. It falls from the sky, and if it touches your skin, then you die. Can't remember too much about it. No, I didn't like it. I think I gave them both 3 stars. It was very average. The main character was somebody who I hated intensely, and if the main character had been somebody different, I would have probably liked it more. But again, if you're looking for dystopians and this is one that you haven't read yet, it might be an interesting one for you, especially as I'm sure there's a Netflix show that is a similar concept, whether it's an actual adaptation or whether it was inspired by it or whether it's just a similar concept for a completely unrelated reason, I don't know. But this might be one to check out if you liked that. We're about halfway through, so if you're still watching, thank you so much for hanging on with me. Leave me a little like bee emoji down in the comments if you've gotten this far, because like, why are you here? Why are you interested? But also thank you so much for being interested. I'm having a great time. But yeah, the next series I would like to talk about is the Selection series by Kira Cass, which is the Selection, the Elite, the One, the Heir and the Crown. This is a series in which I really didn't like the first 4 books, but then I did like the 5th one. So it was worth continuing on with, even though I did kind of question at times why I was bothering to still read them. This is a series that's described as like The Bachelorette, but in a dystopian future, and it's being adapted for some kind of TV series in the next year, I think. So if you haven't read these yet and you're interested in that, pick them up and give that a go. I'd then like to talk about what is probably my favourite dystopian/utopian series that I've ever read, and that is the Arc of the Scythe series by Neil Schussman, which is Scythe, Thunderhead and the Toll. The concept of these ones is, what if humans managed to defeat death? So if you fall off a building, you can get revived, you can get fixed. If you're in a car accident, you can get fixed no matter what injuries you get. Well, in that case, we wouldn't want the Earth to get overpopulated, so we'd need to train people to be scythes. So these scythes go around gleaning people to kind of keep the population in ratio. They still kind of take the same amount of people who would have died each year. And this is an interesting take on it, because it is a utopian world, because we've managed to cure death. But even in a utopian world, not everything is perfect. This is a series that I read within a week. possibly just over a week, but I read the third book as soon as it came out, actually slightly before it came out, because I found an early copy in a Waterstones down in Cambridge, which is a wonderful surprise. And it's a case of, for me, as someone who doesn't finish a lot of series, like, all of the series in this video are the series that I finished in my entire life. So in 24 years of life, I finished 57 series. To actually binge read a series in its entirety within like 2 weeks, it's not like me. That's how good these are. We then got another little run of series that I can't remember anything about, so we're just going to tell you what the series are and then I'll leave it at that. But there's the Black Coat Rebellion by Amy Carter, which was Pawn, Captive and Queen. It's a dystopian series. I enjoyed it, but I can't remember it. We've got the Dreamwalker Diaries by Jen Estes, which is 15 and 16. We've got Don't Even Think About It by Sarah Milanowski, which is Don't Even Think About It and Think Twice. As far as I can remember, these are like, the teenagers somehow find a way to like read each other's thoughts, and so it's like high school drama but with like a paranormal aspect, which is fun. Might need to reread them. We've got Tales from the Kingdom by Sarah Pinborough, which is Charm, Beauty and Poison. These are fairy tale retellings, and I don't remember anything about them. We've got the Zombie Apocalypse series by Adam Gallardo, which is Zomburbia and Zombified. And one that I can actually remember a little bit about, but I wish I could remember more about, is the Revivalist series by Rachel Kane, which is Working Stiff, 2 Weeks Notice and Terminated. This follows a lady who works in a morgue, then she suddenly sees that one of the corpses has been kind of brought back to life. Because she sees this, she gets killed, and then she is also brought back to life, and it's her kind of in her afterlife going around trying to defeat this corrupt government or corrupt company who are bringing people back. I loved it. This was one of the first series that I can remember, like, every single time the next book came out, I ran straight to the library and got it, and I read it straight away. I'm so sad that Rachel Kane passed away at the end of October, because she is a brilliant author, and I'm so glad that I've got so many of her books to still discover, because these are the only 3 of her books that I've ever read. So I'm looking forward to reading the Morganville Vampires, and I'm looking forward to discovering like the Great Library series and other ones like that. Another series that I finished quite recently was His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I read this one with Sean last Christmas, and this is Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife and the Amber Spyglass. This follows a girl called Lyra who has a demon called Pantalaimon who is in the form of a pine marten, and they kind of go on adventures. So the first book is set in like an alternative universe version of Oxford, and then in the second book we meet a boy called Will. He is from our world, but he manages to fall through a cut in the universe, and he falls into Lyra's world, and then it kind of gets a bit like jumping around all like sci-fi, and it's like multiverse story, which I'd never heard anybody talking about. If somebody had sold it to me as that when I was younger, I would have probably picked it up a lot earlier. But I'd only ever kind of heard it as like, these people have demons and it's like a bit snowy. There's a big polar bear, there's a guy who has a hot air balloon. Like, yeah, that's okay. All of those sound like cool things individually, but when you put them all together, they do work really, really well. But unfortunately, I am not enjoying the Book of Dust series as much. I'm caught up on it at the moment, but I think that it might have been better if these had been left as a trilogy. If people described it more, because the demons are almost like Pokemon, they kind of like follow you around, and if people had mentioned that more, it would have also appealed to me more, but that didn't really seem to be something that people mentioned when they were recommending these books to me. Another book series I'd like to just quickly add in here is the Summoner series by Taran Mathari, because if you like Pokemon, then this is one that you should pick up. Taran Mathari effectively pays homage to all of his favourite things in this series, and he does it superbly. So this is The Novice, The Inquisition, The Battle Mage and The Outcast, which is a prequel story following one of the characters in this, like, in his past. So there's a boy called Fletcher. He stumbles across a summoning scroll and he discovers that he is a summoner, which means that he's got a little kind of beastie called Ignatius that comes around with him, and then he has to go to summoning school, which is kind of like Hogwarts but cooler, and then it's also kind of like World of Warcraft, because you've got like the elves, you've got the dwarves, you've got the orcs, like all the different kind of species are in here. So this is like a conglomeration of all the greatest aspects of sci-fi and fantasy from over the years. I would definitely recommend these if you've got a teen boy reader who is reluctant and doesn't think that they will enjoy stories and they prefer to play video games, definitely recommend this for them, because I think it is YA, but it's definitely on the youngest end of YA. It feels more like a teen story, and especially like for me, who this isn't like my favourite genre, but even I couldn't put these down. Like, the twists and turns are great, and also each story is kind of like split into. So in the Inquisition, the first half of the book is about the Inquisition, but then the second half is like telling a different story to lead into the third one. So they work really well if you read them one after the other. And I also think it's a really well crafted, continuous story. It's not one that you can just like, oh, I'll just read the first one. Like, you've got to read this whole series. It really propels you forward and through all the rest of the installments. Another series which I read at the end of last year was The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. This is The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily Lily Blue, and The Raven King. Call Down the Hawk came out, which is the first book in a trilogy which follows this quartet. And I wanted to catch up, so I finally did. I tried to read The Raven Boys 3 times, and I got to page 30 every time, and I just couldn't finish it. I just couldn't get through it, and it was a bit of a struggle, but I'm so glad that I did, because the second book in the series is my favourite by far, and it's worth reading it just to be able to read Call Down the Hawk, because that book is sublime. I can't recommend that book more, and I can't wait for Mr. Impossible to come out, because I really want to see what's going on with these characters in this world, because it leaves on such a cliffhanger, and I'm like, oh, why didn't I wait for that whole trilogy to be released and then binge those together as well? I've also read Maggie Stiefvater's Wolves of Mercy Fall series, which is Shiver, Linger and Forever. I haven't read Sinner yet, but it follows some of the background characters on like a separate story, so I'm still counting it as a complete series because it's technically like a companion rather than a direct continuation. I'd like to talk about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. I'm only talking about this one because I've read the 5. There's also a 6th book which is written by a different author, but these are the 5 that were written by Douglas Adams himself. Again, like, kind of cheating, like the Wolves of Mercy Fall, but it's my video, I can count this. This is one of Sean's favourite series of all time, which is why I read it. It's got a very kind of campy British sense of humour in it, so if you like British humour, then this is definitely the book for you. If you're not a fan of that, then avoid this because it won't make any sense whatsoever. But these are really, really quick stories as well, so this book contains the first 4. And like, so that is 4 complete stories in there, and it's only that big. This is a nice quick one to try and get through. So the next series I'd like to talk about is the only non-fiction series on this list, and that is the Unmumsy Mum series by the Unmumsy Mum, which is the Unmumsy Mum, the Unmumsy Mum Diary, and the Unmumsy Mum A to Z. These are just really lovely books to read if you're a parent who is kind of struggling, because she doesn't like sugarcoat it. She shares a lot of incidents where her sons are absolute nightmares. And when you are a parent, you'll know there are like a lot of trials and tribulations to it, and like you have the great days and you have the really, really awful days. And I love the fact that she doesn't try to make it all look perfect. So this is definitely a series I'd recommend. Sean particularly recommends the last book, which is the Unmumsy Mum A to Z. And we read that one when we were driving somewhere, and he was like laughing so hard. I was scared he was going to crash the car. I was like, oh no, we're going to have to stop reading it. So definitely a series that I recommend, and I really wish she would write more. She said that the A to Z is definitely going to be the last one, but I hope she changes her mind. The next book I'd like to talk about is The Graces by Laura Eve, which is The Graces and the Curses. Didn't love these ones. Read them because they were on the YA Book Prize shortlist, which is the same for the next series I'm going to talk about as well. But this is a case that the 2 books have very different feelings. The first book follows a girl called River as she's looking at the Graces. The second book follows the Graces themselves as they are kind of looking at River. The second book is much more interesting. The first one's kind of insta-lovey. There's a bit of Bury a Gaze in there, which I'm not a huge fan of. And River is just a horrible character. A lot of people love this series, so I'm definitely in the minority of ones who don't. So if you are interested in like a witchy story, then give it a go, but it wasn't for me. And the other YA Book Prize shortlisted series that I've read was The Call by Pedair O'Gwilyn. I might be pronouncing that wrong. It is an Irish name, and I'm terrible at pronunciations at the best of times, so I'm really sorry if I got that wrong. But that is The Call and the Invasion. This was a series that it was just something completely different to what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more of like a thriller, and then it's actually paranormal, and these children when you like come of age, you get called into the Greylands, and you have to run away from these like monsters and run for your life, and like if you can survive for 7 minutes, then you come back and then you're okay, but if not, then you just die. There's a lot of quite triggering scenes in this one, so if you're a sensitive reader, I wouldn't recommend it. There's like characters getting like torn apart and like some body horror and things. But I ended up enjoying the second one more than the first one. I'm not quite sure what made me carry on with it. Some little part of my completionist brain was like, you're going to carry on with those ones even though you hardly finish any other series. But I was pleasantly surprised by the second one. Another series that I can't really remember too much about, which I wish I could, is the Ignite series by Erica Crouch, which is Ignite, Insight and Infinite. This is Angels. I read them through NetGalley and I really enjoyed them. It was a series that I couldn't wait for the next one to come out, but now I can't really remember much about them. Which is much the same as I can say about the Thearon Chronicles by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, which is Beautiful Creatures, Beautiful Darkness, Beautiful Chaos and Beautiful Redemption. I read each of these books as they were released through the library, and I can't really remember anything about them. There's a boy called Ethan, there's a girl called Lena. She is a caster. He's a normal boy and has the most annoying casting ever in the film, and I think the film would have been a lot better if they hadn't cast who they had as Ethan. But yes, I can remember loving them. I'm surprised that I read them all because I didn't read big books, and these are all over 600 pages. I'm thinking about rereading them, but again, they're over 600 pages. I struggle to read big books. It might be a task to reread them, but this series holds a lot of fond memories for me. A series which I definitely won't be rereading is the Everlast series by Sarah Holland, which is Everlast and Evermore. I've read Everlast twice. I read it when it first came out and then reread it before I read the sequel, and I really didn't like it as much the second time around. This is a world in which blood is currency, so when you are like in debt, you'll go to somebody and they will bleed you for your blood, and it will be like melted down into a coin. Fascinating concept. I just think that there's too much focus on like the romance aspect, which I wasn't interested in, and also there's a point in this book where it could leave off on a really good cliffhanger, and then the epilogue kind of tries too hard to set up the second book and to make people come back, and it just takes away all of the impact, and I'd forgotten how much that annoyed me until the second time around when I read it, and it really gets on my nerves. Then I'm going to be talking about some series now which are ones that I've kind of rated all over the place. So ones that I've loved some books and I've hated other books, and there's actually quite a few series like this, which might be why I don't trust myself to read series in their entirety, because I fall in love and then I just get disappointed. So the first one of these I'd like to talk about is the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo, also known as the Grisha trilogy, which is Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising. Was interested by the first one, thought the idea of like these amplifiers for magic is a really interesting concept. Love the world of Ravka. The second one I absolutely adored because they introduced my favourite character, who is called Nikolai, and then the third one was just awful. I don't think it helps that there's a love triangle in this one, and I think, well, there's kind of a love square, I guess, but she ends up with the wrong character. That's the only thing I can really say, and it annoyed me so much that I hated the third book. I think if I reread them, I would enjoy it more because I'd be expecting that level of disappointment. And I would like to reread these before I carry on with the rest of the Grishaverse stories, because Nikolai's character comes back in King of Scars, and the sequel to that is coming out very, very soon, I think in March. So I probably will be rereading these. Hopefully I won't hate them as much second time around. Another series in which I hated who the main character ended up with was the Splintered series by A.G. Howard, which is Splintered, Unhinged and Ensnared. And all I can say is that Morpheus deserved better. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland retelling. Morpheus is bae. That's all you're getting from me. Another series which I rated all over the place was the Queen of the Tearling series by Erica Johansson. This is actually just had a prequel novel announced, so I guess I haven't read this whole series, but I don't know if it counts because it's a prequel, so I'm just sticking him in here and you can choose for yourself whether I'm cheating or not. But that's the Queen of the Tearling, the Invasion of the Tearling and the Fate of the Tearling. First book was very meh. Second book was my favourite. Third book was trash fire. But the second book I love because we start kind of jumping backwards and forwards in time. There's another viewpoint introduced. It kind of gets some sci-fi elements going on, which I wasn't anticipating at all. And I loved the twist on its head and the way that Erica Johansson subverted all of the expectations of the genre. If the first book the prequel that's about to come out is going to be more like that. I will enjoy it, but I will wait and see what the reviews are like before I pick it up myself. Another series which sadly disappointed me at the end was the True Born series by Alyce, which was True Born, True North and True Storm. This is a series in which there's kind of, people have like magical animal personas. I can't really remember, it's been a while since I've read it, but I remember like the lead guy had like antlers that followed him around constantly, and the boy that the main character was falling in love with was like a leopard or something, and it feels a bit weird because of that. I enjoyed the first two, I enjoyed the concept, but I thought that the last one really disappointed me, and it wasn't how I wanted the series to end at all. Another series which kind of gives me weird vibes because of the romance aspect is the Snowdonia Chronicles by Thearon Fox. So this is Here Be Dragons, Here Be Witches, and Here Be Wizards. This is about a girl who falls in love with a boy called Henry, who turns out to be the Red Dragon of Wales. So, yeah, it's a twist. This does come out very, very early on in the book, so it's not too much of a spoiler because the whole kind of series hinges on the fact that she's in love with Henry and he's the dragon. But I hated the first one because of that. I loved the second one. I don't know what it was, but like something about it just completely flipped it on its head, and I thought it worked really, really well. And the third one makes such brave decisions. I was lucky to receive this copy from Shrine Bell earlier in the year, so I got to read this as soon as it came out. And I just could not believe the way that Thearon Fox decided to end this series. It was not how I saw it coming at all. There was like a huge twist that I loved. It's definitely not what I had anticipated, but it makes me want to reread the series and see whether I can see it coming earlier now I know what's going to end up happening. Definitely one that I'd recommend. Another series that kind of ended up disappointing me was Snowlike Ashes by Sarah Rash, which is Snowlike Ashes, Ice Like Fire and Frost Like Night. I can't remember too much about it, but it's like there's different seasons and the magic is like split into like these realms, and then there's also like other realms that are like music and stuff. But yeah, this was the one when the ending just completely ruined the whole thing for me again. As far as I can remember, it was quite similar to the end of the Queen of the Tearling series. So I just think there's like a trope there that I hate. But again, I can't really remember, which is awful because I wanted to love these books because the covers are gorgeous, and that's a really bad reason to want to love a book. But these are stunning. 5 series to go. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I've also read in its entirety the Forest of Hands and Teeth series by Carrie Ryan, which is the Forest of Hands and Teeth, the Dead Tossed Waves, and the Dark and Hollow Places zombie series. And it tries to subvert expectations and it doesn't do it very well. I've also read the Girl Online series by Zoe Sugg, which is Girl Online on Tour, and Girl Online Going Solo. This was a series that I ended up being pleasantly surprised with. I kind of hate read the first one because it was awful, and I was pleasantly surprised because the first book, Zoe Sugg uses a ghostwriter, but in the other ones she kind of writes them herself, and her writing is actually better than her ghostwriter's writing, so she should have just believed in herself in the first place. This follows a girl called Penny, who is a girl online, as she kind of meets and falls in love with this rock star called Noah. There's some good depictions of like anxiety, and it's just a lot of fun, and I liked the way that the series ended. Another contemporary series that I've read is the Burn for Burn series. It just doesn't sound right when you say it like that. The Burn for Burn series by Jenny Han and Siobhan Vivian, which is Burn for Burn, Fire with Fire, and Ashes to Ashes. Another one that I didn't enjoy the end of it. It's a contemporary no, not a contemporary romance. It's a contemporary YA series with some romance aspects, but then it's also kind of paranormally, and it's kind of all over the place. I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was like that great. It is one that I'd be interested in rereading though. Another series that I've finished is the No Virgin series by Anne Cassidy, which is No Virgin and No Shame. This follows the story of a girl who is sexually assaulted, and she has to decide whether she wants to try and get justice through like the official legal system. I think it's a very powerful story, and they're very short. They must be less than 200 pages each, but I read them on my NetGalley, so I haven't actually read like a physical copy, so I don't know an exact page count. But these are very quick reads, and if it's something that you're interested in, like the way that the justice system works with like sexual assault cases, especially sexual assault cases of young people, then it's a story that will definitely fascinate you. And the last series that I have finished and I would like to talk about today is the Warcross series by Marie Lu, which is Warcross and Wildcard. This is a duology about a girl who has kind of stolen access to this game called Warcross, and she's like so good at it that somehow she ends up like competing in the Warcross games. There's like a lot of other stuff going on. It's hard to sum it up very well, and it's not quite that clear cut. There's like quite a few little twists and turns and things that I don't want to give away. But I loved the world that Marie Lu had crafted in this one, and I read both of these books like so quickly. I really wish that there was going to be more of these, because I think there's a lot more potential to this world than just a duology. And it's also one that I think it has an epilogue at the end that actually is really satisfying. And I'm not somebody who's often a fan of the epilogue. I often think that they take away from the power of the ending. But this is one that I felt really satisfied with. And that's it. That is 57 series that I have read in their entirety, and this is a much shorter video than the one we filmed the other day, so I'm glad that we decided to refilm it, and I've made a lot more sense, so I'm feeling quite proud of myself. If you've watched this whole thing, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the first day of Bookmas. This is probably going to be the longest video that we do for the entirety of Bookmas, because most of the other ones that we filmed have been a lot shorter. But I just thought I'd showcase some series that I don't talk about too often, showcase the ones that I've actually managed to finish, and then if we decide to do a follow-up to this next year, then we'll be able to kind of keep track of how many series we finish in 2021, and that's something that I'm always aiming to do more of. I'm always aiming to finish more series, so hopefully there'll be quite a lot to add to this list next year. If you'd like to subscribe, please do, then you'll get all of our Bookmas videos throughout the month directly to you. If you liked this video, then please like it. Oh, I've got a random...
That's your emoji.
I've got a skeleton for you that Sean has just lobbed across the room for me. So if you have finished watching this video, please just leave like a little skull emoji down in the comments if you don't have anything to say. Otherwise, tell me, like, out of all of the series that I've read, which was your favourite? If there's a series that I haven't finished that isn't on here, let me know what series I should read and why. Like, give me a few words to recommend it, and hopefully I'll be able to get to it next year. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow with our next Bookmas video. Bye!